You ever just stop and think about how much AI is like already a part of our lives?
Yeah, it really is kind of wild when you think about it.
Like it's, recommending what we should watch next or, maybe someday it'll even help doctors diagnose medical problems, right?
Right, I mean, it's everywhere.
It's pervasive. But it's like, even though we use AI all the time now, it still feels like there's this, this hesitation. People get a little, I don't know, uneasy when they hear about AI.
That's a really good point. Like, yeah, we're surrounded by it, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're totally comfortable with it.
So for this deep dive, we're going to try to unpack all of that. And we've got this like massive meta-analysis to help us out.
Oh, wow, meta-analysis. Sounds intense.
It is. It's basically like a study of studies. These researchers looked at over 400 different papers, like over 76,000 participants over 2 decades.
Wow, okay, so we're talking about a lot of data here.
Yeah, a lot of data. But it's going to be super helpful for understanding why people are sometimes resistant to AI.
Okay, so what's the main takeaway? Is AI just inherently good or bad? I feel like that's the debate everyone's always having.
Well, that's what's so interesting. This deep dive goes way beyond that simple question.
Okay, good, because I'm ready for something a little more nuanced than that.
Right. So let's get into it. One of the first things this meta-analysis showed was that overall, there's a slight but statistically significant aversion to AI.
Statistically significant, what does that actually mean?
It basically means that the negative trend they saw across all these studies, it's probably not just random chance, There's something real going on there. They found that in about 2 out of every 3 studies, people had more negative reactions when a task was performed by AI compared to when a human did the same thing.
Okay, so there's definitely some resistance there, but you said this feeling isn't universal.
Right, exactly. It's not like everyone hates all AI all the time, and that's one of the first big nuances they found.
Okay, so spill the tea. What are these nuances?
So one of the really interesting things was that the way we talk about AI, the label we use, can actually impact people's reactions.
Oh, that makes sense. Like if you call something artificial intelligence, it sounds kind of scary, right?
Oh, totally. So they looked at 4 different ways AI is often described. One was AI algorithms. So that's when it's presented as math formulas or rules.
Okay, so the stuff happening behind the scenes that we don't really see.
Exactly. Then there's AI systems, which focuses more on the capabilities and what it can do.
Makes sense.
Then you've got AI assistants like chatbots or virtual helpers.
Yeah, those are becoming more and more common.
Right. And then lastly, the big one, AI robots. So that's when AI actually has a physical presence in the world.
Okay, so a robot you can actually see and interact with.
Exactly. And the reactions to these different labels were super interesting. AI algorithms and AI systems got a slightly negative response, not too bad. Same with AI assistants. But when it came to AI robots,
people freaked out.
Basically, yeah. The aversion was way stronger, statistically a much bigger difference. It seems like that physical presence is a huge factor in how people react.
Yeah, I get that. Thinking about an AI that's just an algorithm running somewhere is one thing, but a robot standing right there with you, that's a whole other story.
Yeah, and it really shows that our comfort level with AI depends a lot on how tangible it is, how human-like it seems.
Okay, so labeling matters. What else?
Another super important factor is the domain, where the AI is actually being used.
Right, it's not just about the AI itself, but what it's actually doing.
Exactly. And in some areas, the resistance was much stronger than in others. For example, transportation.
Oh yeah, self-driving cars, that kind of thing.
Right. People are really hesitant to give up control of driving to AI.
Yeah, with all the accidents and stuff, it's understandable.
Right. The stakes are really high. And there are a few other areas where people had really strong negative reactions, like legal and public safety.
Oh, wow. So AI deciding who gets parole or something, that's a little scary.
Right. And think about things like AI being used for risk assessment in court cases. People get nervous about that. And then there's social welfare, using AI to determine who gets benefits.
Yeah, those are all areas where you really want a human making the call.
Exactly, because human judgment and empathy are so important in those decisions.
Right, right. So were there any areas where people were more chill about AI?
Yeah, definitely. It's not all doom and gloom. For example, people were pretty neutral about AI being used in operations and management.
So AI handling things like scheduling or data analysis for a company?
Exactly. It seems like people are more comfortable with AI in those behind-the-scenes roles where it's mainly about improving efficiency.
Yeah, that makes sense. It doesn't feel as personal or life-altering.
Right, and there were a few other domains where the resistance was lower, like entertainment and lifestyle.
So like Spotify recommending music or Netflix suggesting what to watch.
Right, or those targeted ads you see online. People didn't love it, but they weren't super opposed to it either. And then there was also investing in finance. People seem somewhat okay with AI helping to manage their money.
So it seems like people are more okay with AI when it's just making suggestions or doing things in the background.
Yeah, it seems like there's a higher tolerance for AI in those less personal domains.
Yeah, what about healthcare? I feel like that's one where people might be especially hesitant.
It is a sensitive area, right? But actually, healthcare was surprisingly less negative than you might expect.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. But there was one really important distinction.
Okay, tell me more.
So people were okay with AI helping with things like organizing medical records or scheduling appointments. But when it came to AI making high-stakes medical diagnoses...
Like actually telling someone what's wrong with them.
Right, that's where the resistance really shot up.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's a situation where you really want a doctor's expertise.
Exactly. People really value that human touch, especially when it comes to something as important as their health.
Okay, so context is everything. It matters what the AI is doing, not just that it exists.
Absolutely. And speaking of context, this meta-analysis covers a lot of time, like 20 years of research. So it was also really interesting to see how people's attitudes towards AI have changed over time.
Yeah. Have we become more or less freaked out by it?
So get this, the overall trend is towards less negative reactions to AI, especially since around 2016.
Oh, so maybe we're getting used to it.
It seems like it. But let's break it down a bit. The researchers looked at 3 main types of responses: cognitive, affective, and behavioral. Cognitive is all about our judgments of AI, like, do we think it's accurate and competent?
Okay, so basically, do we think it can actually do the job?
Exactly. And in that area, the aversion to AI has gone down a lot, practically to 0 in recent years.
So we're starting to see that AI can be pretty good at what it does.
Right. But then there's the affective response, which is more about emotions and feelings, like, do we trust AI? Do we feel comfortable with it?
So our gut feeling versus our logical brain.
Exactly. And there, the picture is more complex. There was a recent dip in negativity, but overall, the feelings are still a bit negative. So we're starting to believe AI can do the job, but we're not totally comfortable with it yet.
It's like our heads are on board, but our hearts are still a little hesitant.
I like that. And then the last type of response is behavioral. So are we actually willing to use AI and act on its advice?
That's the real test, right? Like, are we actually changing our behavior because of AI?
Exactly. And this is where we see the biggest improvement. People are getting way more willing to actually use AI and take its suggestions, although it's still slightly negative overall.
Oh, interesting. So even though we might still have some doubts, we're more open to letting AI influence our choices.
It's a pretty big shift. And there's also this thing they call the generative AI blip.
Generative AI blip? What's that all about?
So around 2021, there was like a leveling off or even a slight increase in negative feelings towards AI.
That's kind of when things like ChatGPT were getting really big, right?
Exactly. And the researchers think this might be because there was all this initial hype and excitement around generative AI, but then people started to realize, hold on, this is pretty powerful, maybe even a little scary.
Yeah, like suddenly everyone was talking about AI writing novels and creating art, and it felt like things were moving really fast.
Right, and that can make people a little uneasy. But back to the overall trend, it seems like we're gradually getting more comfortable with AI as it becomes more prevalent in our lives.
Okay, so our attitudes are changing. But what about the AI itself? Like, what actually makes us more or less resistant to it?
That's another really important part of the research. They found several key characteristics that make a big difference.
Okay, lay them on me.
One of the biggest factors is autonomy, like how much freedom the AI has to make decisions on its own.
Makes sense. We probably don't want AI making all the decisions for us.
Exactly. The more autonomous the AI, the more negative the reactions. But when humans keep more control, the aversion goes down.
So we want to feel like we're still in charge.
Definitely. Another big factor is performance. Like, is the AI better than a human at the task, worse, or about the same?
I bet people don't like it when AI is better than them.
You'd think so, right? But it's actually more complicated than that. When the AI is described as worse than a human, that gets the strongest negative reactions. But even when it's described as better, there's still some aversion, though it's not as bad.
Wow, that's so interesting. So even if the AI is objectively better, we still have a little bit of a problem with
It
it.
seems like there's something about human expertise that we just, inherently value.
Yeah, it's not just about getting the best outcome. It's about who's doing it. Okay, what else makes us wary of AI?
Another important factor is anthropomorphism. Basically, how human-like the AI seems.
So, does it have a face? Does it talk like a person?
Right. And get this, the absence of human-like cues actually makes people more negative towards AI. So if the AI is just a cold, unfeeling algorithm, that's more off-putting than if it has some personality.
That's kind of counterintuitive. You'd think a superhuman-like AI would be more creepy.
You would, but it seems like having those familiar social signals actually makes us more comfortable.
So, a robot that smiles and says hello is less intimidating than just a disembodied voice.
Exactly. And then the last thing they looked at was uniqueness recognition. Basically, whether the AI recognizes the user as an individual and tailors its responses accordingly.
Oh, that's important. Nobody wants to feel like they're just a number.
Right. And when the AI shows that it understands your individual needs and circumstances, it actually reduces negative reactions.
So if the AI shows that it's paying attention to me specifically, I'm more likely to trust it.
It's all about that personal connection. Okay, now one last really important thing they found was about how these studies are actually conducted.
Oh, so the research methods themselves can affect the results.
Exactly. They looked at something called ecological validity, which basically means how closely the study reflects real-world situations.
Okay, makes sense.
So, for example, did the study happen in a lab or a more natural setting? Did participants have real incentives to use the AI? Was the AI explained clearly? Did the study measure actual behavior or just what people said they would do?
So was it a realistic scenario or just a theoretical exercise?
Exactly. And what they found is that studies with higher ecological validity, the ones that felt more like real life, consistently showed less negative reactions to AI, sometimes even neutral responses.
So maybe some of this AI aversion we see in research is because the studies aren't capturing how people actually interact with AI in their daily lives.
That's a really important takeaway. Our gut reactions in a lab setting might be totally different from how we actually behave when we're using AI to get things done.
It's like in the real world, the benefits of using AI might outweigh our initial hesitation.
Totally. Oh, and one more thing about the research participants. They found no significant differences in AI aversion based on age, gender, or geographical background.
Wow, really? I would thought there'd be some differences there.
I know, it's surprising. But they did point out that there weren't a lot of studies with participants from non-Western cultures, so more research is needed there.
Yeah, that's a good point. We need to make sure we're getting a global perspective.
Absolutely. So, to sum it all up for the learner, resistance to AI is way more complicated than we might think.
Right. It's not just about whether AI is good or bad. It's about all these different factors like how it's presented, where it's used, and how much control we have.
Exactly. And while our feels about AI's competence seem to be fading, our emotional comfort and the feeling of being in control are still really important.
It's like we need to feel like we're in a partnership with AI, not being controlled by it.
I like that. So here's a question for you, the learner. Think about how much AI is already a part of your life. Are you seeing this trend towards less negativity in your own experiences?
Yeah, and think about the times you do feel resistant to AI. Does it line up with what we've talked about today? Are you more hesitant in certain situations or with certain types of AI?
Pay attention to those reactions and what's driving them. It's a fascinating area, and it's only going to get more relevant as AI keeps evolving.
And remember, this research is ongoing. If you're interested in learning more, you can actually find this meta-analysis online. It's a living project, which means researchers are constantly adding new findings.
So it's like a never-ending deep dive into the world of human-AI interaction. Thanks for joining us for this one.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
See you next time.
Bye.